So don't let them steal your light. Don't let them break your stride. There's light on the other side. You'll see all the rain clouds follow me. It's a revolution. Gonna make you out tonight. It's a revolution.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Women in Athletics. I'm very excited to have John Badagliacco with me today. He is an athletic trainer that I connected with at the University of San Francisco, and I know we're going to have some great things to talk about. So thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So can you share a little bit about what you do as an athletic trainer?
Yeah. So, I guess the basics for anyone who doesn't know what an athletic trainer is or does, or it kind of gets confused with like a trainer a lot or a personal trainer. We're basically healthcare professionals that deal with not only athletes, but in a variety of settings. But in my setting at USF, kind of on the front line with the athletes, dealing with injuries, firsthand diagnosis of the injuries, long-term rehabilitation of injuries or post-surgery, and just kind of managing basically their entire uh, like well-being, whether it be setting up doctor's appointments, scheduling MRIs, now doing COVID testing, everything else on top of that. So uh, yeah, basically the simplest way I can put it sometimes to compare it with people, to give people a comparison that they can understand, is it's almost like a physical therapist with athletes in the athletic setting. Um, but physical therapists specialize in the rehab portion of it, whereas that's a small part of what we do. And on top of the entire case management that I just mentioned.
Very cool. Yeah, I know a lot of people, and including myself, before I really got into the field, I didn't know specifically what an athletic trainer was compared to the PT.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have a PT on the series last week, and she was also talking about the differences. So I think it's important to accentuate those because, especially if someone's injured and they have to look for someone to get help with, they don't really know specifically like what they should be looking for.
Right.
What are the kinds of injuries that you mostly see with athletes?
Well, right now I'm with baseball and triathlon primarily. So a lot of upper extremity stuff is mostly what I'm dealing with right now. UCL injuries for pitchers are a big deal. Uh, Probably the majority of which, though, is just shoulder and elbow pain with throwing. So I'm just working on a lot more of not necessarily an injury, but I'm working a lot with soft tissue around their scap and trying to keep that mobile and moving to try to prevent injuries, or just trying to keep their arm from feeling like it's going to fall off while we're trying to make it through a 55 game season. So mostly upper extremity, dealing with scap mobility, shoulder stuff. That kind of bleeds into the triathlon piece as well with all the swimming that they do. So a lot of scap work, a lot of shoulder work. Uh, you know, Still get lower extremities when they happen. I had a kid have an ACL injury this past fall in baseball, so those happen. But I would say it's been a lot more upper extremity in the last couple of years, just working with baseball primarily.
Yeah, what would you say advice would be to someone to like prevent most of the injuries that you see?
Um, it would be probably load management would be the simplest way for me to put it. Uh, Listening to your body for when it's like, hey, something's not feeling right. It's starting to get worse and worse and worse. I think the main mistake people make, and athletes, because they're very driven population. They want to push through pain. No pain, no gain sort of thing. But you kind of have to learn, and especially at the Division 1 level and into the professional level, you learn to train smarter, not harder. And listen to when your body needs a chance to recover. And so getting better at that recovery piece, whether it's doing the uncomfortable stuff like getting in an ice bath, um, doing the stuff that feels good, like Normatex, stuff like that, but just attacking that recovery portion as aggressively as you would attack the training portion. Because when you're doing all that training, you're causing damage. So you need to let your body have a chance to rebuild and recover. Otherwise, you're just continuing to cause, detrimental effects that just keep sending you down the wrong path. So that'd be my short answer for that.
A lot of it is mostly caused by overuse and just people not taking the time when they feel a slight pain or ache coming on.
Yeah, and so that goes back to the baseball upper extremity portion, I think, too. Obviously, ACLs and stuff like that, those will just happen out of the blue, especially when you get a contact injury, if or you plant your foot wrong in the turf and your knee buckles inward, like those, you're not going to feel necessarily coming on for an extended period of time. But the more long-term overuse stuff where it's like I'm having shoulder pain and I'm just going to keep throwing through it because I just need to toughen up, or patellar tendon issues, stuff like that, where it's like maybe you need to cross train and stop running every day. Maybe you need to get on the bike and give your body a chance to not have that impact. And then the other part of it is the seeking out treatment. So you can do self massage on your patellar tendon, helping reduce scar tissue buildup in there and keeping it mobile, and that piece of it as well. So yeah, mostly the stuff that you can control, overuse stuff.
Would you say what would be a good reference or a source someone could look for if they don't necessarily want to go see an athletic trainer, but they feel like something is bugging them? Is there like a website or somewhere that they should look for?
It's a good question. I mean, obviously, the internet has a ton of information out there. Generally, with my athletes, I tell them to not Google anything because it's always going to come back as like they're dying, or they need surgery tomorrow. So I would just say any sources that you look for online, just try to make sure you're finding good sources. Uh, you know, there's a lot of like runners blogs and stuff out there, but you don't necessarily know the credentials of each person putting up all the blogs. So um, personally, I always tend to go the scholarly research route. So if you go to what is it, googlescholar.com or whatever, and search, you can find a lot of free full research articles, which I know you don't want to read the full research article usually, but even just glancing at the abstract or the conclusions for most effective uh, rehab exercises for knee pain, stuff like that. They have a lot of like EMG articles out there that actually look at the the scientific, like, objective level of muscular activation with different exercises, and which ones are the most appropriate and the most effective for you. Um, so I would just say whatever your source is, just try to make sure you're finding someone that's qualified to be giving you the advice that you're seeking.
Yeah, that was a really big difference with going to University of San Francisco, and I started reading more research articles, and I realized how much I love learning from research articles. I mean, in my free time, I would just go and look up anything I was interested in, and I was like, wow, there's so much incredible information.
Yeah, there's a lot, and there's more coming out every day. And then once you get into that side of it too, then it's like, okay, how do you parse out the good research articles from the the herd? Because then you can all, as when I was in I guess it was undergrad too, we had a class that was just reading and dissecting scholarly articles, but like criticizing them. And so reading them and kind of really dissecting how strong of evidence it's actually presenting, like how large is their sample size. Is this, oh, they found a a statistically significant difference, but it's in 6 people out of 8. So how much do we really trust those numbers? And so you get really good, because you can find a research article also supporting, like, oh, chocolate reduces your chance of heart disease, or oh, chocolate reduces your chance of heart disease. You can find one for each one. So as you get better at reading them, seeing how strong the evidence is in each one, and maybe they made some conclusions that aren't actually supported when you actually read the article. Not to nerd out too much on research articles.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, I love it. It's like one of my favorite things to do. Um,
Mhm.
so going back to ACLs, can you talk a little bit on why women may be more prone to an ACL injury than a male?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think we've fully come to a conclusion with that yet. I had a class in grad school where it was all female athlete, and the first month at least, maybe 2 months, was just dissecting ACLs in, ACL injuries in female athletes and why are they more likely to happen. Um, there's lots of theories out there. Q angle being one, which is the angle between where your hips and your knees are. So typically, women will have a wider hip setting, so they think that maybe that might be part of the reason why maybe they have a more knee valgus movement. Um, I might be slaughtering that, but the Q angle, um, they think maybe muscular strength differences could be one in the external rotators of the hip. Uh, even hormone levels, they measured laxity in ligaments as they change through the course of a menstrual cycle, and how the different hormones affect how lax, by lax, how elastic basically your ligaments are. So that changes through the course of the month and through the course of the menstrual cycle. So they think that might have something to do with it. Basically, after literally at least a month, maybe 2 months of going through all these, we decided we don't know. but but there's lots of leading theories on there, unless they have pinpointed it down in the last couple of years. The last I've heard is we don't know exactly for sure. We do know that women are more likely to tear their ACLs, and there's a number of different hypotheses for that, but could be any of those, could be something different, could be a combination. So definitely something for female athletes to be aware of. There are ACL prevention programs out there addressing, uh, strengthening those hip external rotators. That those have been found to be somewhat effective in at least reducing your risk. It won't prevent them completely, but definitely something to look into as a female athlete to be on top of, especially if you've had a previous ACL injury. They found that you are way more likely to re-tear or tear the opposite knee. So if you're a female athlete coming back from that, it's something to always be on top of for sure.
What is your go-to course of treatment when you have someone coming with you, either pre-ACL reconstruction surgery or afterwards?
So for ACLs specifically, my go-to treatment, I mean, pre-surgery, you're just trying to reduce the inflammation as much as possible, and really attack that quad tone. Uh, they've found that, so it's called like prehab or whatever. It's before the surgery, and you're trying to get that knee to its most functional level that you can pre-surgery. Because if you go and get that surgery right away, typically when you've already got all the swelling from the initial injury, and you're don't have a lot of range of motion with it right now because you've just injured it, you have worse outcomes typically than if you take a couple weeks to treat the swelling, elevate, compress, get the swelling down, really focus on uh, quad sets, trying to attack that quad tone, leg raises, simple stuff because you've just been injured, obviously. So we're not getting into anything too much, but really trying to get that swelling down, get that range of motion back, and get that quad firing, and trying to maintain as much muscle tone as possible before surgery. And that they've found that dramatically increases your outcomes. My baseball player that just had it, he had the most ridiculous quads I've seen. We call them Quadzilla, and which possibly maybe predisposed him. There's also research looking at quad strength compared to hamstring strength, whether that predisposes you. But anyway, so he had the largest quads I've ever seen. And so he's actually 3 weeks post surgery right now, and he's doing fantastic. Did I say 3 weeks? 3 months. And he looks like he's 6 months out. He's like, if we didn't know he was only 3 months, it would be like he could get close to playing right now, which he can't just because of timeline. But he's looking amazing. And again, I think that's because he had a further along starting point than most people will have. So he didn't have to come back from as much of a deficit that some people would have. So pre-surgery, that post-surgery right away, you're kind of doing the same thing, decreasing inflammation, decreasing swelling, and working on quad tone and range of motion to try to get back function. So it's a lot of the same stuff for the first couple weeks before surgery and the first couple weeks after surgery. before you can get into the more fun functional stuff.
Would you say that that would translate really towards any injury? If you're going to have surgery, you want to keep working that muscle, making it sure that you can maintain some of the strength, you're not atrophying it too much before surgery?
Oh yeah, definitely. And then it depends on timeline also, obviously. So I just had a baseball player tear his UCL in his elbow pitching. And so that's a 12 to 14 month recovery, and we're in February. So in order to get him back for next season, this needs to be done as soon as possible. So something like that, you're kind of up against the clock. So it depends on your timeline, what your level of competition is if you're trying to get back for a season and stuff like that. Um, but there's always something that you can and should be doing leading up to surgery, whether that's, if you just injured your elbow, so we're not going to do a bunch of elbow, internal rotation, external rotation stuff, but you can start attacking that scap, because that's going to be what you're going to be doing during your rehab anyway. So starting to do scap holds, YT arrow holds, scap squeeze stuff, and then pretty much the day out of surgery, you're doing the ball squeezes, you're doing everything you can. So always just there's always something you can be doing. You just have to find the parameters that you have to work within. Or like another thing that I've told my guys when they're coming back from an upper extremity surgery is like, I want you squatting every day. I want you to come back and be squatting like 400 pounds. Like that's something that you can control right now. You can't do a ton with your arm right now, but if you can get your lower half strong, use this opportunity to do that. Or my ACL patient, he can't swing a bat right now and he's really bad at bunting. So it's like now when you're going to attack that portion of your game. So kind of looking at injuries as an opportunity and just doing everything that you can within what you're able to do.
Yeah. And I know that I was told by my strength and conditioning coach and physical therapist that, let's say if I injure my right leg, I can still exercise my left because some of those benefits actually transfer over to side.
Yeah.
Can you go in a little bit more into that?
Oh man, I can't remember the science behind it, but yes, they've found that there are bilateral benefits to working the contralateral limb rather, which is crazy. That's stuff that they would do. I think we were reading research articles about people that lose limbs and stuff, and them having like phantom limb pain or like an itch on something that you can't scratch. So they'll have them put their hand in front of a mirror, the limb that they do have in front of a mirror, and then scratch it, but then it looks like they're scratching their missing hand, and like how that helps. So the brain is just crazy, especially with contralateral limb stuff. I can't really go into the details of it, but as far as like the exact science, but yes, always if you're working, if you can't work one side, work the other, and somehow our crazy body can transfer that into benefits for the other side as well.
Yeah, I was always very like iffy about that because I was like, I don't want to just have like one huge leg and my other leg is like not really active right now. But when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'll even out, people are like always worried about that. I don't want one leg to be larger than the other, but it'll even out over time. And the things that we're doing now with like blood flow restriction training, stuff like that, I don't know if you've gotten into that much at all, but that's going to be, it's already pretty huge, but learning more about that and what that does for atrophy and how to get muscle tone and muscle mass back at an earlier stage in the rehab when you're not able to load, you're not able to squat heavy, but you can do body weight squats. But if you do body weight squats with this blood flow restriction, it basically hacks the body. It makes the body think that it's lifting a heavier load than it is. And so you're able to uh, increase the hypertrophy of those muscles you've that you've lost over the course of surgery and rehab. And so I think that's super cool. It's crazy.
Yeah, I know about it a little bit, but can you just go over like the basics of what that would look like if someone was interested in it?
Yeah. So, basically what I just said, and again, I don't have like notes or anything in front of me, but it's basically what it does is, so using a pressurized cuff to cut off blood flow to a limb, which sounds crazy at first, and you're like, this cannot be good for you. But the different systems that they have out there, there's standardized cuffs that can maintain an appropriate pressure, and they personalize it to your own blood pressure range. So they find these automated cuffs will find exactly how much pressure it takes to 100% occlusion, which is basically cutting off all the blood flow to that limb. And so for lower extremity, it'll calculate your 100% occlusion pressure and go to maybe 80% of that or 60% of that, depending on your tolerance for it, because it can be quite uncomfortable for the patient. But as you get better at it, then maybe you can get further up to the 80% range. So you're occluding blood flow to the limb, not 100%. There's still blood flow going, but it's severely limiting the blood flow to that limb. So that's causing a buildup of lactic acid and all this other stuff that you would have during exercise. But it's simulating a much more intense exercise than what you're actually doing. Like 12 to 15 body weight squats would normally feel like not much to somebody. Whereas when you're doing this, it's cutting off the fresh blood to the system as well as the used up blood from escaping the system. And so you're getting less oxygen there, buildup of lactic acid, and really just sort of tricking the body into going like, whoa, I am working the crap out of this muscle. And then it basically causes a chain reaction, cascade of events in your body of releasing of different hormones like human growth hormone, and a bunch of other stuff to basically, trick your body into more muscle hypertrophy, increasing bone density, all the stuff that you would typically see when you're overloading somebody with like a heavy resistance exercise. But that's something that you're not able to do when someone's post-surgery. So you're able to work within those parameters of body weight exercises only, but trick the body into thinking, hey, I'm squatting heavy again, which is usually kind of the only way that you can start to get that mass back. Body weight squats aren't really going to cut it for a lot of these athletes who have a lot of muscle mass. Body weight isn't how they got that mass to begin with, and it's not how they're going to get it back. So this helps shorten that time frame and let them start working at getting that mass back more quickly in the rehab process, and it's shown to be really effective and a lot of great outcomes. So at first when I heard of it, I was scared of it, but Dr. Akazuki is he's the baseball Giants team doctor, as well as a team physician for the University of San Francisco. So I work with him a lot, and it's something that he's huge into. And so he was like, we need to start doing this. So he actually paid and sent me to a seminar in Texas to go learn all about it. And so he's super helpful with stuff like that, and just kind of helping with our continuing education. And he was like, no, we need to start doing this. And after going there and learning more about it over a weekend, I was like, sold. It's definitely one of the things that I'm nerding out about lately and excited for.
Yeah, that's super cool. The only way that I saw people doing it is you just have like a band, but with stuff like that, I was always worried, like, how do you know how tight it has to be?
Yeah, and so you don't with those non-standardized ones. So like I said, the automated cuffs I think are the gold standard. We don't have those at USF yet. I was working on getting some sort of a deal worked out where we can maybe get a unit for an affordable price, but then COVID and everything else. So now a lot of our resources are going towards paying for testing and everything else. So that's kind of on the back burner for now. We do have these other cuffs that they're not attached to a processing unit. It's just a detachable, like a blood pressure cuff thing that you pump it up to the pressure you want, detach the pump, and then it just stays on your limb. So those are helpful in that you can do multiple limbs, and you can do them you're not attached to a hose to a computer basically. So you're a little more mobile, but again, you're not able to monitor that pressure, which changes completely with whether you're sitting, whether you're standing, whether you're halfway through your squat, whether as you're starting to get a pump to your muscle and your muscle is starting to swell a little bit, that's going to change the pressure on the cuff. And I think there's actually a leak in these cuffs also. So you'll start at a certain pressure, unhook it, they'll do exercises, hook it back on, and it's at a completely different pressure than what you started at. So yeah, that's the downside of those systems. They're a lot more affordable, and so a lot more people have a lot more access to them, but definitely harder to monitor and really make sure you're getting all those full benefits. I would say with those, it's better to start off on the lower pressure if you're going to use them, you know, and then just go off of level, rating of exertion, rating of pain. Don't push it too fast, too quick, and because you will find that like, oh, I didn't feel like I did much, and then the next day you're super sore. So just starting off low with those, and then you can slowly increase pressure over time because and just erring on the side of caution, especially when you can't monitor the level of pressure. But the automated ones are the way to go if you can. But I think they're like over $2,000 a unit probably.
Wow. Well, that is very cool. I would love to try that out sometime. But yeah, I'm very paranoid with like cutting off my blood circulation. Even when I go to the physician and they check my blood pressure, I'm like, this is so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Some
So
people like it. I like getting my blood pressure checked. No, for a while, I was at a physical therapy clinic and a high school before I came to the University of San Francisco. And one of my first days at the high school dealing with these high school kids, one of these like weight room meathead high school kids, like 17-year-old kid is like, hey, can you tape can you like tape my arm a bunch, like cut off blood flow like for curls? I was like, what are you talking about? And I'd never heard of blood flow restriction. And he was like, blood flow restriction training, blah, blah, blah. And he wanted to like, I was like, no, I'm gonna look into this. And it's like that's one of the times where it's like, okay, let me look up some research articles. And I was surprised to see that there's a lot of support for these sort of things as far as like, effectiveness for hypertrophy and everything else that we just touched on. But basically, again, then I'm able to. So I'm open to new ideas always. I'm not going to shut things down. I'm going to go do my own research and come to my own conclusions about it. But after reading the research, it's like, hey, you're not post surgery. You don't need to do this. It's close to simulating everything you can get from lifting heavy, but you have the ability to lift heavy, so just lift heavy. Like that's always actually better. If you can actually load, then load. But if you can't because you're coming back from surgery, then this is a good replacement to help get you to where you need to be. But it was just my first introduction to blood flow was like, what? You want me to tape a bunch of athletic tape around your arm and cut off blood flow to your arm? No, I'm not going to do that.
that's funny that this guy like knew about it. He did his research, I guess.
Yeah, like I said, I was expecting to be like, there's no way this is good for you. And I was like, wow, there's actually, wow, okay. I didn't know about this. And that was my first time hearing about it. But again, then it was like, you don't need this. If you're young, healthy, no surgery that you're coming back from, just do your regular load in the weight room.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I learned something new too. Um, Going off into tendinitis, that's something that I struggled a lot with as a skater. I had tendinitis in my knees, and I actually got really bad lace bite, which happens to a lot of skaters just from like the pressure of your laces around your boot causes tendinitis in the fronts of your ankles,
Huh.
which was almost career ending for me. And I went through a lot of rehab for it. And I haven't skated for 3 years and I still feel it ache sometimes. So I really did a number on that.
Yeah.
So do you have any experience with tendinitis and what would be your recommendations?
Personally, I don't. But I've had athletes have some tendinitis issues. Um, Recommendations, I mean, it's all about, short term is decreasing inflammation in that tendon, letting it recover, letting it rebuild, like we talked about. If you're feeling that tendinitis and you're just going to keep, you know, uh, aggravating it every single day, it's not going to get better. So, taking ample recovery time, uh, NSAIDs or anti-inflammatories as needed. I'm not a huge ice pusher, but ice can help with inflammation as well, and just general comfort, help decrease pain if you're just having issues that day with pain. The long term, well, staying in short term, then like we talked about, doing massage over that tendon, which is like instrument assisted soft tissue work, or some people call it like the scraping tools, where you're just kind of scraping on the tendon, helping breaking up uh, scar tissue and adhesions between the tendon and the sheath that tendon runs through. So working on stuff like that to keep it mobile and moving freely. And then the long-term rehab of it is mostly like eccentric exercises, which I don't know if that's what they had you do for your situation. So um, short explanation, which I mean, I'm sure you know the difference between eccentric and concentric, but like, so a concentric exercise is where the muscle is shortening to pull, with the load. It's overcoming the load and it's going into a shortened position. Whereas an eccentric exercise, if I'm letting the load slowly pull me into a lengthened position, so I'm controlling it and just slowly letting my muscle lengthen. So a lot of times when people are having like Achilles tendonitis type stuff, we'll have them go up on 2 feet and then slowly lower down on the one bad foot. So you're not having the resistance so much on the way up, but you're, using most of the load and slowly lowering yourself down. And so they've found that that's one of the most effective ways at strengthening that muscle without aggravating the tendon as much. So that's kind of a way to help fix the imbalance, because basically what's happening is your tendon is taking up more of the load than the muscle, like more than it should be. So you want the muscles are more resilient, more elastic. It's able to regenerate. It's what you want to be using. So you want that to be stronger and have less of the tension and the load to be on your tendon. So increasing the strength in that muscle, increasing the mobility of the tendon, are kind of the best ways to overall deal with that. And then there's everything else as far as dealing with the whole body and going up the chain. So if you're having Achilles tendonitis, is it because you have no arch in your foot and we need to do foot strengthening exercises or some sort of an insert? Stuff like that is more the global approach. But overall, working on the tendon, breaking up scar tissue, keeping it moving, decreasing inflammation when you can, and strengthening all the muscles around it.
Yeah, I want to highlight specifically 2 points that you said. One being like tempo and working in eccentrics, because I know a lot of the time, um, at least what I see from like people posting on Instagram and social media, everyone just like does their exercises really quickly and they don't put in eccentrics, which
Mm,
can do a lot for, like you said, strengthening the muscle a bit more, working out your imbalances. And
mhm,
then the other point that you mentioned is that a lot of times where you have the pain isn't necessarily where the problem is. So, like you mentioned, assessing, if I have ankle pain or knee pain, is that coming from my hips? Is it coming from my foot? Am I like constantly at an imbalanced position that's maybe like offsetting my hips and that's causing some other pain? So, it's important not to just look at, I have ankle pain, so I must only treat my ankle.
100%. Yeah, one of the things that one of my professors said growing up that's always been in my is like, don't be misled by the obvious. Don't be, just because you're staring like this thing is on fire and staring at you in the face, it's like, don't be misled by that. Always try to treat the whole body and try to find the driving, like, is this a symptom or a cause? So absolutely.
Yeah. And it's nice that you're, at the school, you can watch your athletes practice. But a lot of the times, if someone's just an independent athlete and they start to experience a pain, they'll go to the doctor and say, hey, my ankle's hurting, but they're not explaining their movement patterns, what kind of sport they do, the things that they do on a daily basis that could be impacting that. So I think that's an important thing to add in, where if you're going to a healthcare professional with pain, really go over everything that has to do with your movement patterns so that they can accurately assess what may be causing that problem.
For sure. And I mean, I'm not hating on doctors necessarily, but I will find that you have to make sure not all doctors are equal. You have to make sure that you're going to somebody that knows um, what they're dealing with here. So if you just go to a general medical physician and, my ankle hurts, uh, I think a lot of time you're just going to get this catch-all diagnosis. They'll just send you away like tendonitis. It's always tendonitis. Tendonitis is the easy, get out of jail free card diagnosis of like, what's tendonitis? Like, just rest it, leave it alone, take some ibuprofen. Um, so if you're really a competitive athlete, you're in tune with your body, you're really trying to make these adjustments, like we talked about, is whether that's foot and ankle strengthening to fix a knee issue, stuff like that. Seeing someone that's more specialized towards, muscles, tendons, bones, like an orthopedic doctor of some kind versus a general medical physician. They're extremely, skilled and knowledgeable, but they have to know a lot of things as far as internal medicine, stuff like that. So they're not specialized in the athlete, like the needs of an athlete, especially when it comes to muscles, tendons, bones, stuff like that. So otherwise, you're just going to probably get a tendonitis diagnosis and a prescription for some extra strong ibuprofen on your way out the door.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I can't even tell how many times I went to a doctor and they were like, "Oh, it's just inflamed. Take 2 weeks off." I was like, "I can't take 2 weeks off."
They don't understand athletics. Yeah, no, there's no weeks off. Um, yeah, so working with someone that knows, like I said, what your goals are, what your level of competition is, and how. And that's where an athletic trainer is extremely valuable. Like you said, we're with you every day, and I can help you. Okay, maybe we can't do this movement or this specific exercise, but we can cross train and we can do something else in the meantime. So you're getting that rest for that tendon, but you're not bed rest. We're still doing everything that we can to so that you're able to compete at a high level. So I think that's where the athletic trainer is valuable, especially in the athletic setting. Like you said, seeing you every day, working with you every day, knowing what your limitations are and helping you find, like we talked about earlier, there's always something that you can be doing. So helping you find that gray area of what you can work on in those parameters while giving something else a rest if you need it.
Yeah, I think that's also a really great thing. I'm glad we brought up because a lot of times someone will go to the doctor, they say take 2 weeks off, and then the athlete is really let down because they're like, well, I can't take 2 weeks off, so I'm just going to have pain forever because any solution is going to tell me to take 2 weeks off. So
Right.
it's good to try and find if there are different ways that you can rest specifically that body part while still doing some practice for your sport. Although that was very difficult for me when I had tendonitis in my ankles because anything that I'd have to do on the ice involved me putting on my
Putting on
skates,
skate. Yeah.
which was the culprit. So that was like a specific situation. But for other things, like when I had knee tendonitis, there was still some stuff I could do just without getting into as great of a range of motion with my knees.
Right. Right. And with the knee tendonitis and stuff like that, again, working up the chain, or we're working on those glutes and getting like those external rotators in the hip stronger so that we're taking pressure off of the knees a little bit. Is it an ankle mobility issue? So someone that's really looking above and below where the actual pain is and trying to find the root cause of it and not just trying to deal with the symptoms.
Yeah, I definitely did a lot of banded monster walks and glute walks during that time.
Yeah. Perfect.
So, veering off into, I want to touch on concussions because that is probably like one of the most intriguing things for me in like sports and rehabilitation. I suffered with multiple concussions. One of them specifically stands out to me because I don't even remember how I fell and I got off the ice, and I remember I couldn't see past 10 feet, and what I could see was doubled. So definitely that was a big concussion. And I look at my partner and I tell him this, and he was like, "Oh, cool." I think I was,
Yeah.
and I was like, "What do I do?" He was like, "I don't know." So then I just got on the ice and I continued skating, and I don't even think it was brought up. So there's definitely a lot that goes into concussions. And if you can touch a little bit on the treatments and stuff for that.
Sure. I mean, it's always changing, but man, you ice skaters, you don't wear helmets, do you either? um, so concussions, where do I begin? Uh, I mean, the main thing is taking adequate rest afterwards is kind of what we've found to be the best course of action following a concussion. Um, yeah, they've become a bigger buzzword over the course of the last 10 years or so. I remember being in high school, playing high school football, getting head to head contact and just seeing stars, like you said, and just being like, and my athletic trainer at the time, and it's not like she did anything wrong. She just came over and was like, "Hey, you doing okay?" And I wasn't even trying to hide anything. I wasn't trying to be a tough guy, but I was just like, "I'm fine," which is what every athlete says. And now, and like, she asked me what quarter it was, what the score of the game was, and it was like, yeah, I know answers to all that. It's like, well, I'm fine. But that was where like the concussion evaluation was at the time, and what we didn't have much. And so now it's really evolved into a lot more uh, stringent as far as balance assessments and memory assessments and concentration, stuff like that. But anyway, so after sustaining what you suspect to be a concussion, which if you're seeing double is more than likely a concussion, um, it's mostly rest. It's mostly um, sleeping as much as you can, which again, things are always changing. Back in the day, they used to say, don't let the person sleep. They'll die. They won't wake up. So again, another story to veer off of, like I started amateur boxing, and my first amateur boxing match, I started throwing up afterwards,
Okay.
um, which I think was maybe from getting punched in the head, but also I think I held my breath the whole time instead of breathing while I was punching, but it was my first one, so I forgot to breathe the whole time. So I think it was also like exertion and just throwing up. But they were afraid that I had a concussion, obviously. So the whole drive back from where this boxing match was, which was like a 2-hour drive, like past midnight, and I was like, I just want to sleep. I just had a boxing match. I'm so tired, and they're just like, you can't sleep, like you might have a concussion. But the fact of the matter is rest is the best thing that you can do for it, and the only way that your brain is really able to rest is when you're sleeping, and it's the only time that it can rest and regenerate. So we tell people now, sleep as much as you want, sleep as much as you can. No one needs to wake you up and check on you, stuff like that. um, and then basically your timeline's symptom based after that. So you're resting and you're doing zero activity for the first, until you can be symptom free. And then after that is kind of slowly adding in activity and seeing how your body reacts to that as we increase blood flow. So usually we'll start you on a bike or something where we're increasing your circulation and your heart rate, but not jogging, because then you also have the jarring motion of the impact. So we're getting rid of that and just increasing your heart rate, seeing how the increased blood flow and everything in your brain, if that increases your symptoms, then we go back, wait until your symptoms are gone, try that stage again. And then we get into jogging and then more sport specific drills, stuff like that. Again, things are always changing though. There are now research articles out there now saying that early light exercise and increasing that blood flow early on can actually maybe decrease your recovery time, like help you out in the long term, and make symptoms last not as long. I'm not sure where we've landed on that, but again, always be up to date with the literature and always, adapt with where we're at. Things are always changing. I can tell you for the University of San Francisco, that's not where we're at in our protocol. It's the rest until you are symptom free. Once you're symptom free for 24 hours, we start you on the bike. No symptoms return after that. We get you doing jogging, more sport specific stuff, a full non-contact practice, and then a full practice and game. So over the course, like even if you were symptom free in the first 2 days, that's still going to be like a full week to get back to where you were. Touching on that though, uh, there are concussions that are severe enough where they don't recover normally. Most concussions will recover along that timeline that I just touched on. But so I had an uncle that was hit by a car while he was crossing the street, and so he like rolled up, hit the hood, fell and hit the ground, and then went to work. And he didn't take adequate rest when he was supposed to. He went to work the next day. He's also does like part-time photography, so he was spending a lot of time staring at a screen, which is also part of that recovery portion. You're not supposed to be looking at your phone, computers, TVs, because the light waves will just activate your brain. So that's not part of that rest portion that we talked about. So that's where athletes get upset. It's like, go rest, sleep. And they're like, well, can I watch TV? No. Can I text on my phone? No. Like, you're just supposed to lay there, do nothing. But anyway, he didn't do the recovery portion correct right away. And so then once he tried to do that, he was having headaches and issues with vision months later. And so that's not a normal recovery time. And so once you get to that point, then you need to seek out help. And so there's typically what they'll find then is like these long-term uh, post-concussive syndrome is called it. I think they call it something different now too. you might have different eye tracking issues that you don't even know. So like you're trying to read and your eyes are kind of like jumping around a little bit more than they should. They're not tracking the way that they should. So that can cause your headaches, stuff like that. So you basically need to see specialists that help you rehab from this now. So then it's like it's eye tracking exercises where they're having you stare at a ball over here, a ball over there. So it's more active in the rehab and the recovery portion of it. So when you're if you are someone that's having those long-term symptoms, don't just be like, okay, I should just keep resting. And it's been a month, but I should just keep resting. At that point, you're stuck in a loop. And so you need to seek help to get out of that. And so luckily my aunt talked to me about that. I talked to my uncle about that. And he started seeing a specialist and now he's doing much better, but they would have never known. And it's not something that a lot of people know about. It's more like if you have a headache, just go rest. But if it's more that long-term thing, then you need more long-term rehab to retrain your brain, your eye tracking, stuff like that to help get you out of it.
Wow.
So I don't know if that was everything you want to talk about with concussions, but you can re-guide me if there was something else.
No, that's really cool. Yeah, I just took a like concussion certification course. It was just a little education, and they did not touch on like sleeping or not sleeping. So I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of still knew the previous of like, don't go to sleep no matter what, like
Mm.
the worst thing you could do.
Oh yeah. It's the best thing. It's the best thing you can do, that's what's crazy about science and research. It's like it'll flip on its head. So you just kind of have to pay attention. But yeah, that's the best rest that your brain can get, sleeping. And they've also found that that's when changes in your cerebral spinal fluid happen in the brain and stuff like that. So it's really sort of the best time for your brain to flush itself out and recover.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, now that you bring it up, that is when your brain rests. So very
Mhm.
understandable. Yeah, and I probably had like 4 or 5 concussions. My first one was in a car accident, and that one I don't really remember like the rehabilitation period. But I supposedly had symptoms for like 10 months and I wasn't
Oh.
doing anything about that. So
Mm.
it's really interesting to hear about the eye training because I mean, I get chronic headaches all the time now. I don't know specifically what it's from. I've gotten MRIs, everything looks normal, but no one's ever really seen that and been like, oh, well, maybe we'll take you to a specialist. So that's kind of interesting for me.
Yeah, it's possible you might want to look into it's not like a regular eye doctor situation, but like someone that deals with post-concussive, long-term effects, and they do different assessments and stuff like that. And like I said, it's minuscule, but even if there's a minuscule change in your eye tracking, like basically picture it's like someone having blurred vision, before you get your first set of glasses when you're a kid, or I don't, not everyone wears glasses, but like for me, it was like, oh, I'm having headaches in school. And then you go to the eye doctor and you realize like, oh, I need glasses. Like my eyes aren't in focus. No wonder I have a headache. But you don't know that until you know that. And so it's sort of the same thing with the eye tracking thing, where it's like if your eyes aren't tracking correctly, it's basically like being out of focus, and that's going to cause headaches, and that's going to cause a lot of other issues, and you won't know that without looking into it. So maybe it will help you with your headaches. Also, at a certain point, if you have 5 headaches and one of them was whacking your head on the ice when you're 10 and the other one's like a major car accident, headaches are sometimes part of the long-term issues. Those are kind of the cases that I usually tend to tell my athletes to try to motivate them. I say motivate versus scare them into being completely open and honest with me about their symptoms and about their recovery, because it's all, as we said, symptom based. So I can't tell how you're feeling. If you're going to lie to me and tell me I feel 100% fine today, and I get you on the bike and you feel way worse, and you're going to lie to me because you want to try to play in this game this weekend, that's not going to help your recovery, and that's going to cause these major long-term issues down the line, where you're having severe headaches years later, and that's because we didn't treat this correctly now. And so those are typically the stories that I tell my kids now, so that they will be open and honest with me, because that's the only way that we can treat it. I don't know how you're feeling. I need to trust that you're being honest with me.
Yeah, I can say that chronic headaches are not a good time I don't recommend them. So anything you do for rehabilitation is definitely a go.
Speaking of, like, so have you heard of differences in concussions between men and women, since we're on women in athletics?
Yes. So what I know is a little bit to do with like your neck circumference and differences in neck strength, um,
Mhm.
but not really so much past that. So if you know more, please go ahead.
Basically, I mean, you touched on one of the. It's kind of like the ACL, where we're not 100% sure why it is that, but we do know that female athletes tend to be more predisposed to concussion. One of the things that you touched on was neck musculature. So if you're getting, even if you're not getting hit in the head, but you're getting hit in the body, and your neck musculature isn't strong enough to support your skull, then they're going to have a more extreme whiplash effect, and causing the brain to move around inside the skull. So that's one thing. They've also looked at training those muscles. Can we get those to flip and turn on fast enough in a reaction time of you getting hit? We're not really sure if they would turn on in time to protect you anyway. Um, there's the whole difference in hormones that we've touched on. They've also found that there's differences in gray matter in the brain. Like, so there's differences in basically the entire neural composition between males and females. And so they think that maybe that makes a difference as well. I can't remember which one it is, but I think women have more gray matter. So maybe you guys just have more stuff that can actually be damaged, and men's brains are a little bit more white matter. It's a little more protected. But so we don't really know for sure, but we do know that more predisposed. So just something to be aware of, and keep an eye on the research as it comes out.
Yeah, when I was interning at the University of San Francisco, I did a research project after my first like semester there, and I did it on neck strength and concussions. And one of the things that I found, you talked about if the muscles can turn on fast enough. I think it was in the milliseconds. I don't
Oh
remember
yeah.
exactly, but like at the time that like peak head acceleration occurs, but it takes like double or triple the time for your muscles to activate, which is
Yeah.
crazy because you don't even like you don't think about stuff like that. But basically, in order to protect your head, you would have to be like forceful the
Tense.
entire time. Yeah,
Mhm.
which really isn't plausible in like a contact
Mhm.
sport or like football where you're just watching like the ball and then someone comes at you from the side.
Which is why they say that the hit that you don't see coming is the most dangerous one. So it's when you're looking this way. That's why they're trying to get rid of blindside blocks in football and stuff like that. Because it's like, at least if you see someone coming, you can somewhat anticipate and brace yourself. But if you're not looking at all, yeah, your body's not going to have a chance to react. I think it's, again, I don't know the timing. I think it's like 0.03 seconds it takes or something for the muscle for that reflex loop to happen, to activate the muscle, and it's like 0.001 milliseconds for that peak acceleration force. So you can do all the training you want. Mainly it's just keep your head on a swivel.
Yeah, and I think it might have something to do with like head mass as well, just because of the
Yeah.
whole like mass acceleration is force. So maybe men have a larger head and that force kind of dissipates a little bit better
Mm.
for
Yeah.
female.
Same thing. And yeah, they apply that to toddlers and stuff as well. Obviously they're they usually have a larger head compared to body and compared to neck circumference, so less able to control it. So yeah, it's definitely part of it. uh, Larger mass to control if you don't have enough musculature to control it, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm great that we touched on that. Yeah, I love concussions, and that's probably gonna be my passion project moving forward if I get into grad school. I would love to do like a dissertation or a final
Mhm.
thesis on that, but we'll see how that goes. Thank you so much for joining me today and, educating everyone. I learned some new things and I hope other people did too. So thank you so much.
No problem.